Hello, it's me.
Hello, it's me.
My name is Cinnamon Roll, and I'm building my Bluebird bus into a full-time home. Fall is officially in full swing, and with that, the gloomy, rainy days have begun. Unfortunately, this means that I've officially run out of time to paint the exterior of the bus. So, for now, I have to turn my attention to other things. With the rains have also come a bunch of leaks that I will have to address at some point in the future. I can't leave these areas as they are because they will cause mold to grow behind the walls, and that's not healthy. That will be in a later video, so for now I'm going to address something that I've been avoiding for the last few months. The interior of this bus was a mess. I had been rushing to get as much done on the exterior as I could, and as a result I neglected to clean up inside, so that was my first order of business. I don't know what it is about cleaning up that feels so satisfying to me, but when this was all done, I felt 10 times better. This also made the next steps much easier. I noticed during priming that under the back emergency window was a little weak, so I decided to add some bracing, similar to what I did above the window. I used some leftover steel, cut it to length, cleaned the paint off where I wanted to weld it, and then welded it on. I then gave it a quick spray with primer to stop it from rusting, and this is the result. The welds aren't pretty, but they're functional, and this is all going to be hidden in the wall anyways, so I don't really care. Another issue that I've been ignoring is this gutter that sits over top of the main entry door. Originally, this gutter overhang the door jamb by an inch or so, and any water dripped out of the end and then down the side of the bus. Because I widened the door jamb, the water from the gutter now runs down the inside of the door jamb and was causing some rust issues at the bottom of the stairwell, so I needed to extend it. I started by cleaning off the area where I needed to weld with a wire wheel, and then cut the piece of metal to size. After checking fitment, I welded it into place. I cleaned it up with the wire wheel, and then primed it. So the reason why this video is delayed is because I was doing some training this past week on how to drive a school bus. Part of the training is to understand how quickly a fire can completely engulf a bus, and that opened my eyes to a big problem with my own bus. Under this electrical panel there used to be a piece of metal that spanned the distance from the floor to the panel itself. This is essentially a part of the firewall between the engine/transmission and the interior of the bus. I'm pretty sure I accidentally scrapped this piece of metal at some point, and so I needed to build a new one. I started where I always do, by taking measurements and drawing out a schematic for what I wanted this to look like. I then cut out my piece of metal and transferred the measurements to it. I labeled which lines to cut and which ones to bend, and then I used the grinder to score all the bend lines and cut on the cut lines. I went inside and used the brake, that is, the tool, not like lunch break, to bend up my piece of metal. Some of the bends I couldn't do on the brake, so I hammered them over on the workbench. I gave the part a quick test fit and realized that I needed to remove this other cover first and make a few adjustments to the part. I then screwed it into place, and then reinstalled the panel cover. There was still more to be done on the door jamb, largely these holes needed to be filled, so I quickly grabbed the grinder and welder and filled them in. And of course it started raining just as I started on this. Once and for all, I wanted to address the window defrost situation. This has been an on-again, off-again project for a while, and I finally came up with a solution that I like. I started by installing the other fan for the passenger window. First, I drilled a hole for where the wire would go through, and then I drilled some smaller holes and screwed the fan into place. It was a fairly simple install, all things considered, and the only thing left to do with the fan was to wire it up. I chose to wire it so that it would run off the same switch as the other fan because chances are I'll want both fans to run if I'm going to use them. And I know it feels like you guys have seen this a gajillion times, but I decided that this hater situation needed to be resolved once and for all. I liked the idea of using the plastic shroud, but I had a hard time figuring out how to get the hose to attach to the dash, so I came up with a new idea that I think will work much better. I decided to build a new fan shroud out of metal, and it would direct the air from the fan to the plastic dash without the use of a hose. I started by taking measurements and drawing out a plan. I wanted to do as little welding as possible, so I needed to rely on bending as much of the material as I could. Once I'd figured out my plans, I went outside and began cutting and scoring my pieces. I then took the pieces inside and began bending them.
Did it the wrong way. Crap.
Now, there were a few times where I bent the pieces the wrong way and had to bend them straight again, but I managed to figure it out. Once everything was bent up, I checked fitment, and then I welded all the pieces together. I cut an axis hole so that I can install the heater fan in the future. And then cleaned everything up with the wire wheel. I then took it inside for a test fit. I had to cut some material out so that the shroud would sit flush against the firewall, but other than that, it fit perfectly. I temporarily fastened it into place with these self-tapping screws, and I have to say, I'm pretty satisfied with the setup. It is by far the simplest and probably will work the best. And that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, I'd be very grateful if you'd consider subscribing. Enjoy your day, and I'll see you next time.